In the years following the First World War, not all Italians rallied behind the fascist takeover in Rome. But those who criticized the strong-arm tactics of Benito Mussolini were physically attacked, often left crippled by his army of black-shirted thugs. When the body of Giacomo Matteotti, Mussolini's chief foe in Parliament, was found in a field bearing multiple stab wounds, the anti-fascist resistance moved underground. Communist freedom fighters mingled with bomb-throwing anarchists. Marxists and libertarians plotted with monarchists to fight the totalitarian regime. Many concluded that the only way out was a campaign of sabotage, a deliberate chipping away at the foundations of Mussolini's economy. Targeting foreign investments first, they found one of Italy's top revenue sources was the new capital of motion picture making, Hollywood. It had not always been like this. In the first decades of the new century, Italian movie makers captivated the entire world with films like Cabiria. But the war in Europe crippled the film industry. Even the studio that produced the legendary Quo Vadis sat obsolete and forgotten. By the early 1920s, 9 out of 10 movies shown in Italian movie houses were being made in Hollywood. Mussolini detested Hollywood personally. He hated its simplistic portrayals of Italian Americans and deplored its images of liberated Western women, but he understood very well the value of motion pictures as a propaganda aid. Soon, Mussolini was sending out feelers to U.S. movie companies. "Make your films cheaper in Rome," went the pitch. Italians would work for just 1/10 of what their American counterparts earned. In 1923, it happened that producer Sam Goldwyn had just such a project on his hands. After paying a whopping $600,000 for the rights to film Ben-Hur, Goldwyn had too little left in his coffers to handle the scale of the production. Mussolini promised Goldwyn his government's full support in Rome. They could even use the old Cines film studio for their headquarters. All Goldwyn had to do was agree to rehabilitate the old studio and bring it up to modern standards. An advanced team underestimated the chaotic situation inside Cines. Financial ledgers show that, in its first 6 months abroad, Goldwyn took delivery on some 125,000 tons of steel, masonry, and lumber. A huge indoor stage was built, as well as studio shops, warehouses, and facility repair. All building material came at inflated costs from businesses with deep ties to the state. All of this was part of the economic boon that anti-Mussolini forces were determined to stop. Printed handbills stoked the political tensions on the set. They underscored the discrepancy in pay between what Italians were paid for their work in comparison to the Americans. Flare-ups between pro-Mussolini and anti-fascist contingents also caused slowdowns. Labor unions stepped up demonstrations. The theft of tools from work locations grew in number as evidence mounted of vandalism and arson. All the problems led to skyrocketing production costs and worried supervisors. Patience ran thin, not just in Goldwyn offices, but inside the boardrooms of New York's major Hollywood backers. In April 1924, the trade papers reported on a corporate restructuring that was, In fact, a hostile takeover. Marcus Lowe and others bought controlling interest in both Goldwyn and the financially troubled Metro studio. Metro-Goldwyn Pictures was born, and once producer Louis B. Mayer was installed as West Coast production head, the new studio was branded Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Louis Mayer and his hand-picked vice president, Irving G. Thalberg, tackled the situation in Rome. They fired half the company and handed over control to Fred Niblo as director. The resistance abroad would only grow bolder. In the 1989 book, Speaking of Silence, leading actress May McAvoy told author William M. Drew about a fire inside the Ben-Hur studio.
The day I arrived in Rome, I was taken out to the studio to be shown my dressing room. They had to build a special one for me at the end of what had once been a greenhouse for beautiful plants. Now it held all the chariots and equipment they were going to use in one of the episodes in Ben-Hur called The Garden of Daphne. We were standing there talking, and all of a sudden there was the most terrible explosion directly across, I'd say 3/4 of a block. It was at the end of this place that held all these beautiful carriages. Well, it was a total loss. They never did the sequence. They had to cut it because they couldn't rebuild all those things. Eventually, we had to come back and complete the film in Hollywood because we had so much labor trouble over there. It was terrible.
Cause of the fire? Not revealed, nor were the findings on other suspicious occurrences, including negligence during the shooting of the chariot race that resulted in at least one driver's death and the destruction of dozens of horses. The dreams of the Ben-Hur company at large, however, would suffer a final blow off the coast of Livorno. Plans had been in the works all year for how to stage the book's critical pirate attack. The sequence would make or break the entire picture. An armada of Roman-masted ships was commissioned from a local shipyard. Each of the 7 full-sized vessels was budgeted at some $40,000, a total of over $5 million today. On its initial voyage, the fleet's flagship was rammed at full speed by one of the other vessels. With the October rains approaching, repairs proceeded around the clock to make the deadline. Once the flagship was ready again, it went to unfurl its sails. People screamed in horror as the painted mainsail ripped in half from top to bottom. Evidence pointed to sabotage. Still, the production was able to proceed thanks to art designer Arnold Gillespie. He had given unauthorized orders for a backup sail to be prepared just in case. That hedge against disaster saved the entire project. For the pirate battle, some 200 Italians were hired to play Roman deckhands and officers, while another 100 were set to play attackers. A plot was uncovered at the last minute to arm anti-Mussolini extras with real blades and axes. Arrests were made, and the weapons seized. But that did not end hostilities. The illusion of fire engulfing the Roman ships was meant to be achieved for the cameras through harmless fireworks in smudge pots. Instead, the decks, still wet with tar and varnish, exploded in flames. Costumed extras were forced to jump overboard before rescue boats could move in. Witnesses on other ships stood paralyzed with shock, sure the death toll would number in the hundreds. At the end of the day, dozens of costumed extras failed to return for their street clothes. Bonfires were built on the sand to dispose of all the unclaimed pants and shoes. An inquest was ordered in Rome. Harbor officials denied any responsibility, adding there was no proof any Italians drowned at Livorno. But with a growing threat of wrongful death lawsuits, MGM halted production and ordered the Ben-Hur company home. Mussolini's bold partnership with Hollywood ended as an embarrassment to both sides. The fascists did not want Italians reminded of a growing underground opposition to their rule. The new managers of MGM only wanted to distance themselves from any liability in Rome. The last vestige of the American company was barely out of the harbor before Mussolini proclaimed himself sovereign authority of all Italy. MGM publicity staff issued stories saying no lives had been lost overseas. Despite the challenges, the production was nothing less than a miracle. Corporate boss Marcus Lowe said the company had come home only after successfully completing everything it was sent there to do. Only leading player Francis X. Bushman dared speak out about what he saw in Italy. The price he paid for it would be his future in Hollywood. The charred hull of the flagship was salvaged and sold for scrap. The sea battle sequence was completed at the studio headquarters in Culver City and in the waters off Santa Catalina Island.